Not a battlefield, not a palace, not a throne room. It started in a field, a 13-year-old girl standing alone in the late afternoon sun when something happened that she would spend the rest of her short life trying to explain. She heard a voice, and the voice told her she was going to save France. To understand why that matters, you need to understand what France looked like in the 1420s. France had long been torn apart by a bitter conflict with England, later known as the 100 Years' War, in which England had gained the upper hand. The country was occupied, exhausted, losing, and running out of time. A peace treaty in 1420 disinherited the French crown prince, Charles of Valois, amid accusations of his illegitimacy, and King Henry V was made ruler of both England and France. England had not just beaten France on the battlefield, it had legally erased the French royal line. France didn't just need a military victory, it needed a miracle. Born around 1412, Jeanne d'Arc was the daughter of a tenant farmer, Jacques d'Arc, from the village of Domremy in northeastern France. She was not taught to read or write, but her pious mother, Isabelle Romay, instilled in her a deep love for the Catholic Church and its teachings. England occupied much of northern France, and many in Joan's village of Domremy were forced to abandon their homes under threat of invasion. Joan didn't just hear about the war from a distance, she lived inside it. She watched her neighbors flee, she watched her world be taken apart piece by piece, and she felt every piece of it. At the age of 13, Joan began to hear voices, which she determined had been sent by God. She would later identify them as Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret. They came with light. A brightness, she said, was almost unbearable. They came with warmth, and they came with words that should have been impossible. You will save France. You will crown the king. Go. The voices came back, every day, growing clearer, more specific, more urgent. They told her to go to a local lord named Robert de Baudricourt. They told her he would give her soldiers. They told her exactly what she needed to do and in what order. For 3 years she kept all of this completely secret. 3 years of hearing what she believed were divine instructions and telling nobody. Think about what that took. 3 years of carrying a secret so extraordinary that telling it would either make people believe she was chosen by God or believe she was losing her mind. She told no one. She prayed. She waited. She listened. As part of this divine mission, Joan took a vow of chastity. She was making herself ready for something she could feel approaching. At the age of 16, after her father attempted to arrange a marriage for her, she successfully convinced a local court that she should not be forced to accept the match. An illiterate 16-year-old peasant girl argued her case before a court of law and won. It was the first glimpse of the mind that would later silence the finest theologians in France. The voices told her the time had come. She was 16 years old. She had never left her village. She had never been trained in anything beyond farming and sewing. She had no money, no weapons, no rank, no connections. She had the voices, and she had a destination, a military garrison called Vaucouleurs, 2 days' walk away. She left without looking back. Initially rejected by the local magistrate, Robert de Baudricourt, she persisted, attracting a small band of followers who believed her claims to be the virgin destined to save France. He told her to go home. She went home. The voices told her to go back. She went back. He told her to go home again. She waited. She was not going anywhere. What finally broke Baudricourt's resistance? The news from the front was catastrophic. The English were tightening their grip on Orléans. The French were losing. His options were narrowing. And this girl, who had come back twice and showed no signs of leaving, was absolutely certain she knew what to do. Sometimes, desperation looks like faith. He gave her an escort. She had won. Joan cropped her hair and dressed in men's clothes to make the 11-day journey across enemy territory to Chinon, site of the Crown Prince's palace. 11 days through occupied France. Enemy patrols at every crossroads, a price on the head of anyone loyal to Charles. She rode through all of it, calm, focused, the voices with her every mile. Chinon, the residence of the Crown Prince of France, the man Joan had been told by the voices to find, to serve, and to see crowned king. She had ridden 11 days through enemy territory to get here. She had no appointment, no introduction beyond a letter from Baudricourt, and she was about to walk into one of the most powerful courts in medieval France, alone. Charles had been warned about this strange girl and her claims. He was wary, suspicious, and cautious by nature. So he set a test. He disguised himself among his courtiers and placed someone else on the throne. Joan walked in, scanned the room, walked past the man on the throne, and went directly to where Charles was standing hidden among the crowd. Joan of Arc won the future Charles VII over by supposedly revealing information that only a messenger from God could know. The details of this conversation are unknown. They spoke privately. What she told him, nobody knows. Charles never revealed it, not then, not ever. But whatever it was, he went from a skeptical, wavering prince to a man who believed her completely. That conversation changed history. Against the advice of most of his counselors and generals, Charles granted her request. Think about the courage that took. His entire court was telling him this was madness. His generals were insulted, his advisors were afraid, and Charles, the hesitant, cautious, uncertain Charles, told them all to stand aside. A teenage girl was going to lead the French army, and God help anyone who got in her way. Joan set off to fend off the siege of Orléans in March of 1429, dressed in white armor and riding a white horse. The symbolism was deliberate and total. White for purity, white for divine mission. A banner showing God and two angels, made to her exact specification. She wasn't just a commander, she was a message, and France desperately needed a message. The soldiers who rode with Joan described something they struggled to explain. A change in the army's mood. Men who had been defeated and demoralized found themselves wanting to fight again. Veterans who had stopped believing in anything began to believe in her. Whether it was faith or charisma, or the sheer impossibility of what she was, the army that rode toward Orléans was a different army than the one that had been losing. Orléans had been under English siege for 7 months. It was the key to France. If it fell, the South would follow, and with it any hope of French survival. Professional commanders had failed to break the siege. Charles's generals had failed. The city was starving, and into this situation rode Joan of Arc, 17 years old, on a white horse. Before a single battle was fought, Joan sent the English a letter. She told them God had sent her to drive them out of France. She told them to go home. She warned them of what was coming if they stayed. The English commanders who read it reportedly laughed. They would not be laughing for long. Joan led from the front. She carried her banner rather than a weapon. She later said she could not bring herself to kill, but she was always in the most dangerous place on the battlefield. Joan led several French assaults against the Anglo-Burgundians, driving them from their bastion and forcing their retreat across the Loire River. During one of the assaults, she was struck by an arrow between her neck and shoulder. She fell. Her soldiers thought she was dead. She pulled the arrow out herself, said a prayer, wept briefly, and went back into the battle. The soldiers who saw it would follow her to the ends of the earth after that moment. After such a miraculous victory, Joan's reputation spread far and wide among French forces. 7 months of siege, broken in days. The city that had been starving, desperate, and on the verge of surrender was free. Joan knelt in prayer before she celebrated. Then she wrote to Charles, "Come to Reims, it is time to be crowned." She and her followers escorted Charles across enemy territory to Reims, taking towns that resisted by force. The momentum was extraordinary. Town after town surrendered rather than face what had broken the siege of Orléans. The English, who had seemed unstoppable, were retreating. France, which had been dying, was breathing again. All of it because of a girl from Domremy who heard voices in a field. Joan enabled the coronation of Charles as King Charles VII in July 1429. She stood beside him holding the banner she had carried from Orléans. When asked later why the banner was there, she said it had shared in the hardship. It deserved to share in the honor. The voices in the field had told her this would happen. Every word had been true. By every account, Joan wept, not from sadness, from relief, from the overwhelming reality of having done what she had been told to do. A farmer's daughter, an illiterate girl from a village nobody had heard of, standing in the greatest cathedral in France, beside the newly crowned King of France, having done exactly what the voices had promised she would do. She had believed, and she had been right. But the voices hadn't told her to stop. France wasn't free yet. The English still held Paris. The Burgundians were still enemies. And Charles, the man she had just crowned, was already listening to the advisors who were telling him Joan was becoming too powerful. The coronation was the peak, and peaks in history are always followed by a descent. In part 2, we follow Joan of Arc into the darkness that came after the light. Subscribe now so you don't miss it.